So today what I want to talk about is Terry had mentioned that we're doing all these state antibody projects. And one of the big things that we had to figure out first when we did that was making sure that, making sure that everybody's email matched and that there weren't any email errors. And so one of the things we did was had to create a way for them to validate their email, or at least to prompt them that their email was incorrect. So we had them enter it twice, and if they mess up, then we wanted to prompt them. Now the problem with this is that we don't have any way of preventing them from saving the survey. If it is incorrect, they could just ignore it. But at least this gives them a way for us to notify them that something is wrong. And so this is I pulled this form out from one of the COVID projects that we worked on to show you how this was working. So I just have these two fields here, this email address and this re-enter email address. And so if I put in an email and so now if I enter an incorrect email, or if I go back and delete this one, it's going to prompt you that the email addresses both need to be the same. And it's set to where it does it only if there's a value in one or both of the fields. So that way it's not prompting you as soon as I start entering into this one. And if I enter it correctly here, it doesn't show up. But if I change either one of these, it'll pop up. So I wanted to show you guys how I built this, and this is using Shazam and JavaScript. So let me go to the project here and just show you how the fields are set. So really there's only these two fields, the email address and the re-enter email address field. That alert is built in Shazam. It's not a field anywhere on here. So it's custom in Shazam. So this is the Shazam that I built, and you'll see here that these are really long because we have styles, and also we have to have the Spanish in there because we can't use the multilingual external module with the Shazam. So we have the Spanish as well. But here are the two fields, the email and the email to, and then this is the alert. And so I have in the Shazam, I've added an ID for each one of these email fields. That way I can reference it directly. And the same thing with the alert. So I have an ID for those three so I can reference them directly in the JavaScript. So basically what I'm doing is, this is another chunk of code to disable the cut, copy, and paste function for those fields. So we can ignore this for now. That doesn't have anything to do with it. But basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a function in JavaScript that says that anytime the input for email 2, which is the text box, changes, I want to run a function. So I'm getting the value of email 1, and I'm getting value of email 2, and then I'm just checking them to see if they're identical or not. So if they're not equal, then I want to display the alert. And so the alert is there, but it's hidden. So I've set the display to none. And so if email value 1 doesn't match email 2 value, then I want to change the CSS rule that I'm applying from display equals none to display equals table cell. And so that's what makes the alert pop up. Otherwise, I don't want to see the alert at all. So then I change the display back to none. Now, this is if email 2 is changed. So if I've already entered a value in email 1 and I go into email 2 and I start entering a value, that's when it fires. Or after I toggle out of that, or after I enter a value in that, that's when it fires. But I also need to run it in case email 1 has changed. but I don't want it to be blank. I don't want it to run when email 1 is blank and email 2 is blank. So it's the same function, but I'm just checking email 1, and then I'm still assigning the value to these variables for email 1 and 2. But now I'm checking that email 2 has a length greater than 0 and that they don't match. And then it's the same rule. So it's the, I'm going to display it. If there's a value in email 2, I guess I'm not checking if email 1 is blank because I assume you've already entered email 1 in there. Because if you've entered email 1 and then you tab over to email 2, email 1 has something, but email 2 is blank. You don't want it to pop up before you even have a chance to enter the second email address. That would get annoying. So it's only after the email 2 has been entered, and then if you go back to email 1 and change it and it's not correct, then it'll pop up. So it's checking when you have issues in both, like I showed you here. So if I fix it, it goes away. But if I change the value in email 1 and it's not the same as email 2 and I tab out of it, then it pops up again. So this is a kind of a complicated example of what we did. And I mean, if anybody wants this code or the Shazam or any of that kind of stuff, you can always just email us and we can send it to you. This is a situation that we had where we had the Shazam already built. And so I had to figure out a way to incorporate these functions into the Shazam that we'd already built. And when I was thinking about demoing this for you guys today, I started thinking like, well, what if there's an easier way to do this? Like maybe I've over-engineered this kind of thing in that, maybe Shazam and the JavaScript is kind of overkill. So I created another project, and it logged me out. I created another project here that I just wanted to try and see if I could do it with just branching logic. So let's go to this project here. And now I also tried to do it with the field embedding because that's a hot new thing right now on REDCap. And I've been doing Shazam for a long time, and so now I need to start thinking about how to build things with the field embedding because it's a lot easier, and I think a lot of you guys are going to be doing that more often. So here's the same thing, 2 email addresses. Now this one, because it's branching logic, it's more difficult. So it does pop up immediately when I start typing in because they don't match. But if I put them together and I tab out of it, then I can have a thing that pops up and that says the emails match. Now, if I go back and change any of these, it's the same functionality, and it's a lot easier. So let me show you what I did. So in this instrument, I have an email address field. I have an email address to field, same as I had for the Shazam. I'm using the field embedding, which allows you to build table-like structures for display, similar to Shazam, but it's a lot easier. And so you would just use this table menu item to build your table here, and then let me get out of that. And then you would just add your label. You would just type your label in wherever you want it. And then whatever field you want to display, you put the field name there, but similar to piping with the brackets, but you would use the curly braces, and that automatically pulls the field in for you for display. And then you can go into here, into the HTML, similar to Shazam in that way, where you can make, add padding, or you can change the background color or that kind of stuff. You can do all that in there, and you can do some of that here as well with the rich text editor. So I built that. I built the 2 fields. I built the field embedding, and then I have these 2 banners here, these alerts essentially. And I was surprised at how easy this was. I was like, I cannot believe I did not think of this earlier. literally you're just saying if email 1 does not equal email 2, show me this alert. And that's all it is. And then for the correct banner that they do match, you're saying the opposite. You're basically saying email 1 does equal email 2, but I've also added that email 1 is not null. So email 1 has a value in it and email 2 has a value in it. Because if I left it just like this and ran it, then it would pop up automatically. So let's go back to the, because they technically equal each other. There's nothing in them, but they equal each other. So, you know, you want to have that additional condition in order to make sure that this doesn't pop up right away. So let me put that back. And I also tried to put those values in here, you know, like if email 1 wasn't blank and email 2 wasn't blank, but it just got too complicated. And it's one of those where it's no problem if the alert shows up, because at least it's alerting the user that there's something that's comparing these two emails, and so they're going to try to make that alert go away. And at least it's making them think, you know, a little more about their email address instead of just, you know, plowing through all these data entry fields. So that would be, you know, that would be the simplest way to have some validation on your email address. And this will work with any field because you're literally just comparing one value to another. So if you have something that's it's kind of like double data entry, but not necessarily double data entry, you just want them to verify that what they've entered is correct, you could have 2 copies of the field that you need. Like, let's say you need their address and you need to make sure their address is correct. You know, you would just make copies of those fields and you would just add the branching logic for those. And then you would have alert or descriptive text boxes that are alerts for each one of those. So then you would have something that says like zip code doesn't match, or street address doesn't match, or, you know, first name doesn't match, that kind of thing. And you would just have each one of these built in for every pair of fields that you want to validate. Now, eventually I would like to try to figure out if there's a way to have it where I can do some JavaScript where if this alert is visible, maybe I can block these save buttons. So that way you literally cannot save the record unless unless that alert has gone away. So there might be a way to toggle that with JavaScript. I haven't figured out that. I was just thinking that, you know, that might be something nice to try. Same thing with the survey. If there's a way to hide this submit button conditionally to where it doesn't allow you to submit unless everything is validated correctly. I mean, you know, we can do that on web forms whenever we do programming and designing websites and that kind of stuff with JavaScript. It's just being able to pull that functionality into REDCap and have it, you know, have REDCap be able to use that functionality the way we want it to, because we have to kind of go through REDCap in order to use these features. And so we have to try to figure out the best ways to do that. So does
I'll tell you one place that
what's that?
I'll tell you one place that would have been and still may be really valuable if you ever get to that point is preventing the submit button from showing if the participant is less than 18 years of age. So one thing that we found out is, you know, no matter how hard you try to prevent people from making errors, it's just impossible. I mean, it takes the kind of programming that Manny was just showing you, which, again, doesn't really prevent you. It can give you a big banner that says, you need to make these the same, and then people still go on. And the same thing with age. So I've seen, because people make mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I've seen people that put in like a date of birth, and they'll put in one like January 12th, 2020, just because they're just not, you're multitasking in your head and you're not really thinking. And so a big banner pops up that says you have to be 18 years of age or older. And they're like, obviously it's a mistake because I was born in 1950 or something, whatever. But the point is, they're not really paying attention to what's going on the page. And then it becomes a problem, especially in a project like we're managing now, where it's essential that when you generate a label for a blood sample, that the date of birth on the sample matches the date of birth in the electronic system. So if you've started off already from scratch putting in a wrong date of birth for yourself electronically, you're going to find yourself with some difficulties. So it would be nice to be able to continually try to prevent people from making mistakes. The other thing that was interesting with the code that I'm not, when Manny had created this, one of the big things was to make sure that you didn't copy and paste it from one email address to the other, which of course defeats the purpose. It's a pain in the ass to have to put it in twice. You think, well, I put it in right the first time, but if you've managed any large-scale projects, you know how many times people enter the wrong email address accidentally. I mean, it was a great addition to REDCap when they added the validation requirement that a field that is an email field, if you validate it as an email field, it requires the @ sign rather than the then just like putting in, for me, I might put tsmith6.arizona.edu because, again, I'm multitasking in my head, and then I make a mistake. So in the same way, Manny made sure that you couldn't just copy and paste it. The interesting thing is that once the form has been submitted and saved, let's say that for some reason you want to grab that email address and paste it into some other, like a spreadsheet, like I have to maybe send some email address of somebody to the lab, and you can no longer copy and paste it because he took that feature out, which is pretty cool and fascinating. It means you got to manually type it into a different application. So anyway, I just thought this was really cool, but it would be great if you were able at some point to figure out how to CSS out that submit button if they didn't meet criteria. We tried so many, I know that you're not necessarily familiar with the project, but we have an instrument that requires people to enter information at various stages of a blood draw process, including a lab within the context of the site that's doing the blood draw, not a lab that's sent out to, but all this required information to verify every step of the process, that this is the correct person, labels are generated, all this. And yet, no matter how hard you try to make sure people enter all the correct information, they will still do what they can. I don't know, maybe not intentionally, but bypass entering all the data, and then in our case, a sample can't be submitted until they go back and add that information. So it's very difficult to be able to stop somebody from being able to save a piece of an instrument unless certain criteria are met. That'd be kind of cool. It's branching logic on steroids. And speaking of which, I in no way want to change the subject because other people may have comments or questions or whatever about this, but since I mentioned branching logic, I will say that I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to experience that new feature in REDCap, where if you have a fairly large project and you have maybe 10 or 15 fields that are driven by the same branching logic and you decide to change one, that every field, you have the option of changing every field so that you only have to change the branching logic once on the first field and it will cascade into all the other fields. However, it is irritating when you don't want it to cascade, and so you say no, but then you go to the next field and it asks you the same thing, and you get this over and over and over again. It was irritating when I first ran into it. The version that I will be putting in this weekend has added a checkbox to allow you to turn that off for that particular branching logic. So that will be a nice addition. And that's really the only big change or improvement that's coming out in the version that's coming out this week. Coming week, unless there's something. They're releasing them now every Friday, so I'm installing them usually on Sundays. So I'm not sure if there'll be something earth-shattering that appears on Friday, but otherwise, the one thing that you will see is being able to turn that off. I was thinking that there might be something else, but I can't remember. Anyway, I didn't want to get off that main, but I didn't want to forget it.
No problem.
So, go ahead.
So Tanya had a question. She was asking if we can use the CSS to change the color of these headers, similar to the way they look here, this kind of thing. And you can. It's just that because it treats it as an active field with REDCap, it automatically just hides that. So let's go here to the style for and we'll say background color 262. So normally, if you want to override what is being applied, you would use the important attribute. So if we wanted this to be, dark blue, and we wanted these to be white, if I can highlight them. And they'll display like that, but if we go to the add records and actually see how it looks, well, I guess that worked this time. When I was messing with it this morning, if I was in the field, because you can see that REDCap gives you this green highlight anytime you're in the active field. When I was doing it this morning, this was reverting back to like a transparent color, so the whole thing would be green. But it looks like as long as you put the important tag there, then it overrides whatever style that REDCap is applying. And that's the cascading part of cascading style sheets, is that inline takes precedent over, other styles that are applied by like style sheets, that kind of thing. There's different ways of setting styles, and the inline style takes precedent over everything else. It also depends on where it is in the web page as well, depending on how, like, if you have an inline style that you've set up above and you reset it somewhere else, then it also does that too. So I just took important out of one of those because I want to show you how it actually looks when you change it. So now you can see that the email address here has no background color. And if I toggle out of it, now that I'm not in that field embedding, now that it's not highlighted because it's not the active field, the color comes back. But as soon as I go back into it, it goes away. So as long as you have the important attribute, then it will stay. And I had told Tanya that she would have to use the REDCap CSS injector, but it looks like you don't have to. You can just put it directly in there, and that'll be fine. Does anybody else have any other questions or want me to go through or explain anything else?
All right. So
Terry, Tanya wants us to take a look at project 8699.
All right.
So let's go do that real quick.
Yeah.
Let me ask her what the issue is.
Yes, thank you, Manuel. The reason why, and thank you for showing me that nice little trick. Now, in this particular project is what I'm looking for. If we can go to, let's go to instrument providers, and I would like for you to look at it in the dashboard first. You may have to create a...
Just add a record. Yeah, add a record.
Yeah, it's still a fresh database. So here is what I was hoping to be able to create is a background color, like Shazam shows us in the examples, not the font. I did get my headers in there, but the background of it, a different color, which I was seeing that you had done on that first invoice that you put up, but you said you used Shazam. Is that correct?
Well, this whole thing is built in Shazam. This one is.
Okay.
And so that's how I apply the styles is with Shazam. So the CSS is all in here. So these inline styles for like the background color and the border and all that stuff. But it's the same thing. I still use the important attribute. So you would just have to go in and fix whatever colors you want here.
So we could go into...
Okay.
Yeah, we could go into design. Yes, sir, please. I'll get out. And now the problem I was having is because in here, all it would show was my HTML. But if I go into the, you called that the CSS module? Or at my
so there's a separate REDCap external module called the CSS injector, which allows you to target specific elements and apply styles to them. This would just be the HTML editor for the rich text editor, and you would be able to add the background colors directly to here. So what I would recommend is if you just highlight the row you want.
Okay.
If you right click on it, then you see that it has row properties.
Okay.
And then it allows you, if you go to advanced, it allows you to pick a background color. So like, let's just say.
Oh yes, do this.
We'll just add a gray, or we'll make it darker so we can see.
Yes.
We'll make it blue.
Okay.
Or red. Nah, red's too bad. Green.
Okay, good.
So it's there, but you're going to run into the same problem. Whereas if you if your cursor's on it, it's going to go away. So now that we've added the background color, if we go back to here, you'll see that it's in there for background color for this table row.
Okay.
And so we should be able to just add the important to it.
Nice.
And you might have to, so let's look at this, because I think this might have been how I did it earlier, and maybe that's what made it go away, but we'll look. Yeah. So if you see here, now it's going away even though I have the important on there.
Okay.
So when we're applying it to the table row, it's being overridden. So we would have to go into each one and add it specifically to each table cell, if that makes sense. So let's take this style off. Now if we right click in one of the cells, we'll go to cell properties and we'll add the background color there. And I think, let me see if this works. If I can add the important here. No, didn't look like it took it. So let's go back and I'll add the color. And then in here, so now you can see that the background color was applied to the table row before. Now it's down here in the actual cell. So then we would add the important value, and now I'm just going to copy this for all of the cells here. So now you can see that now the whole row is there. So let's save that, and it should stay this time now that it's in the table cells.
Oh, that's wonderful. You really did put that in that PID, so I can go back and look at that?
Yeah, it's saved there, so you can change it. You can change the color, anything you want.
Thank you, Manuel, so much. I appreciate it.
Same thing with the columns. If you want to have the providers a different color, you could just go through manually and just add that background color snippet to each one of those.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's weird that if you do the table row, it gets overridden, but if you do it cell by cell, then it doesn't. It must have something to do with the way the table row styles are being applied or something like that. Because I know there are certain CSS rules that you can't apply to a table row, but that you can to a cell. So it's just one of the weird things with HTML, I suppose. But that's good. That answers my question because this morning I was wondering why it wasn't working. And so that answered that question. That's nice.
Thank you again so much. You just saved me hours of pounding my head. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's why you're supposed to come to these things.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead. Go ahead, May.
Oh, no, just asking the same question. If anybody had anything else.
Yeah. Nope. All right. Well, we're going to call it again then today. Thanks for joining. We'll update you again next week. We'll find something that you might enjoy. And again, thanks for joining this Red Zone this week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.